This is uRoutine's You Are Infinite podcast, the show where host Ed Johnson explores the daily habits, routines and stories of world-class thinkers and doers. Each week you'll hear from experts who share small practices that fuel big results. Hit subscribe and let's jump into today's episode.
Georgina Watson, welcome.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
I'm really excited about this one. 14 years at Shell, during which time you moved roles, shifting towards health and developing your interests. You had a good salary, security, stability in the corporate world, which I think a lot of people are probably used to and comfortable with. And then you left it all to follow your passion, which is pretty brave and impressive. You're now working on several things: the ripple effect, the human network, and big work alongside psychotherapy training. Let's start by talking about that shift from the corporate world to start-up side hustles and ultimately, as we've spoken about just then, following your passion. Tell me about that journey. Talk me through that.
Sure. So I did 14 years within a kind of typical big, complex, multinational corporate, lots of constraints, policies, ways of working, brilliant opportunities, stability, as I said. I did the 3-year graduate scheme, which was in London, which was a great kind of foundation and grounding. And then I moved to Borneo for an assignment, which was incredible, real adventure. I just felt I needed a change and wanted to grow and be in a completely different environment and culture, and that really satisfied that need, and it was a huge learning opportunity for me. Learned a lot working in a joint venture which was half Shell, half the Brunei government, and a very interesting long-standing joint venture they have. Then I came back to London, did a sort of global change management role, restructuring parts of the business, growing in South America and China and India and shrinking in more Western Europe. And then I took a bit of a risk and worked in a project role within the health team. And that was the first step to kind of really following my passion around psychology and kind of mental well-being. And my boss at the time thought I was mad because I was going to take this 1-year project role, and if it didn't succeed, I would be out. And if it was a success, then that project was going to become more established and would be a longer-term role for me. Luckily, it was a success, and I think that was a huge learning at that point around following your passion and what you love. And I remember talking to a couple of people who I worked with when I was trying to weigh up this dilemma, and I said, steady job, but sort of okay in terms of interest, or taking a risk, but somehow in your gut, knowing it was right and it was really aligned with my passions and my curiosity. That paid off, luckily, and then I spent the sort of subsequent 6 years working on the mental wellbeing strategy within Shell. For the sort of last 3 years of that, always had a bit of an itch to leave, but it was, as you say, weighing up that stability in the salary for what else could be out there. And in the end, I left about 6 months ago, which I knew was going to be very difficult, sort of emotionally, leaving that shell, if you like, literally, of familiarity and security and routine, and having your kind of career laid out for you, to figuring it out as you go. First couple of months outside the corporate chains was difficult, readjusting, and that's where I think things like routine and goals were incredibly important for me. And now I'm really enjoying this more entrepreneurial phase and kind of really feel lit up by it.
Right. Let's talk about that shift then. For you, you spent your entire career up to sort of 6 months ago in the corporate world, 14 years at Shell, and now you're out of that. How's that period of adjustment been for you? You talk about routine, or you reference routine just there. Has that been difficult? How's that adaptation affected you?
When you're going through quite a lot of churn, I think it's really important to have some elements as consistent as possible. That really helped me. And there are many philosophers who talk about, freedom and too much freedom and or too little freedom. Earlier in this year, I had kind of too much freedom kind of all the familiar structure had kind of gone. And that was, can be quite a scary experience. So just being aware of that and clinging onto and putting in place structures and routines are absolutely crucial when you're going through change. And I'm someone who actually loves freedom. So I was quite shocked that this kind of overwhelming freedom was too much for me. Having a rhythm, getting up every morning, forcing yourself to go somewhere every morning, work on your projects when you don't have, a boss looking over your shoulder and making sure you're doing what you're meant to do. Exercise, I think, is crucial. Good sleep, all the kind of the self-care rhythms and routines. Support from others, I think, friendship is crucial during these changes. I was told recently, you just need about 3 good friends in life and then you're going to be okay. And I thought that was really interesting. Having said that, I think we all need different layers of kind of concentric circles of friendships or community or belonging, and that's where my fascination with the ripple effect comes in, because I think you need 3 friends or whatever, but I also need a sort of slightly further out concentric circle around familiarity and community and belonging. When you go through big change, I think sometimes that layer is lost, and we saw that during the pandemic. So people kept in touch on Zoom with their besties, but you didn't see that person in the cafe you normally see each morning, who you don't really know their name, but they're familiar, or that familiar place of work that you're used to that's so important that you have lost. So there are various kind of layers of community and friendship, and I think it's really important to sort of bridge those bits that you've lost through going through a change or a life event.
And that's what you're doing now. So you talked about the ripple effect. Talk a bit more about how that idea came about, where the need is. You've touched on that slightly there already, but talk a bit more about how that's evolving and adapting.
Yeah, so the ripple effect, I'm fascinated by human connection and belonging and community. And I think, a lot of work has been done around diversity, inclusion, which is great. But there's this missing piece around belonging, and it's hard to kind of articulate what that actually means or feel like. But you know yourself when you belong or when you don't belong, and how painful it can feel when you don't have somewhere you belong, whether that's a place or a community. In an ultra-connected world with technology, loneliness is still on the rise, even though there's more opportunity to connect. And it's a huge issue, loneliness. I have been thinking about reflecting on connection and community and belonging, and what could be a sort of equation for that. So there's something called the trust equation, which I learned about years ago in sort of leadership, which I love, which is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. So if you think of someone you really trust, they tend to be kind of good at their game, reliable, interested in you, and interested in you more than interested in themselves. And that kind of creates this idea of trust. I love the idea of creating an equation or something tangible for something that feels intangible. And that's when I was thinking about connection and belonging and community, and what could be an equation for that. So if you distilled a feeling of connection into its purest forms, and how do you create that? You can create connection and community by, working on a project together, or having a book club, or playing tennis. What's happening is people are coalescing around something in common, whether that's a book or a tennis court or a game. You're sharing or learning or growing, something's shifting inside of you, whether you're reflecting on the book or you're playing a competitive game of tennis. There's something inside that's slightly shifting, and you connect again over time, and that creates sort of actually intimacy. I was thinking, well, you could get everyone to go and, play tennis together, but could you substitute that for something much more simple, low cost, low effort? So super simple. And then I started playing around with what could that be in its smallest form. So having a few people in a group reflecting on a fascinating quote daily for 5 days, does that in and of itself create connection? And then I started to sort of test this. And really interestingly, the data showed that it did. And there were many reasons for that. There were people in the same place at the same time, and this was online through WhatsApp, from different countries. And there was a quote I would put in every day, which was inspiring and kind of on a personal level quite reflective. And then people would react with an emoji. And when you saw someone else's reaction, you would feel a sense of connection. But it was super low effort. And then I thought, okay, what could shift the needle even more? Perhaps there needs to be some discussion. So I added that component. And then I thought, what could shift the needle even more? And that came on to this idea of learning something. So something that's reflective and learning and can be discussed. And it's time bound. And then I've added a kind of charity component and I've gamified it. And there's also a face-to-face element. So can online be converted to offline? And does the prospect of offline create or motivate people to connect more online? Does it matter? I've sort of grown this equation and now I'm shrinking it back down to just only have, the most critical elements that create connection. And I've been testing it with individuals. I've varied the kind of size of groups. And we're learning all sorts of things. And the litmus test for me is, am I learning something new as well? Otherwise, it's not good enough. So do I feel that I'm learning something? Am I reflecting? Do I feel connected to these people? Do I feel motivated to engage? And that's the litmus test that I'm using is myself. So we're doing all sorts of things around mental well-being and philosophy, geopolitics, and I'm shifting up the topic for people. And the feedback so far has been very, very good. And I've now got a bit of interest from more the B2B space, particularly around building cohesion and social capital amongst virtual teams and newly formed teams. But also it's just a fun mechanism to operationalize mental well-being content. So you could either go to a two-hour webinar about, well-being and, having a purpose in life and how important that is, or quality of sleep, or gratitude practices, or whatever. But you're probably not going to be fully engaged and you'll sort of forget about it and you probably won't even turn up because you have other priorities going on. You can't commit to 2 hours. So this is a fun, short way of engaging people around content as well. And the byproduct is building social cohesion and capital amongst teams or amongst people.
And I have to say, it's fantastic. I've been part of it for the last, I think, 5 or 6 weeks, and I've really, I'm learning a lot from it. B, I'm really enjoying kind of the notifications that I get and the engagement with other people. And C, I just think generally it's a fantastic idea, and it's brilliant to see it evolving and developing over time as well. I know we've spoken about it several times. So that's fantastic. Obviously, you're doing lots of different things now. You've got the ripple effect going on. What else is going on? What else are you working on? Talk about the other projects you've got.
Yeah, so I've got all sorts of passion projects going on, and I love them all. So another thing is called the Human Network. I started the Human Network about 3 years ago with somebody at the time who was the lead psychologist at Netflix, and we were both in sort of mental well-being type roles within corporates, and the initial aim was just to have a chat and learn from each other, and that's how it started. It's called the Human Network, and it's very informal. We've now grown to 40 people across 14 countries, and we speak once a month for an hour. It's very informal. I don't want any slides. I don't want any sales pitches. And the conversations started as sort of, how do you measure well-being? How do you influence? How do you shift culture? How do you shift behavior? And now we're kind of talking about much more fascinating stuff. The impact on the brain with AI, but is that the main thing we should be worried about for future generations? Or are other big things in the world like poverty, for example, just as important, if not more influential? We're talking about, leadership, and the meeting point, because we've now expanded from corporates plus government plus academia. So I want to have the voice of research in the room too, with the scale of government, because we can just learn so much from each other. We've been a bit of a sort of behind the scenes kind of community or network for a while, and I thought now actually, you know, the conversations we have are so rich. And again, the litmus test for me is, am I learning something new here? I want to learn something I don't already know. Like, tell me something I don't already know. Not to say that I know everything at all, but I need to be learning too. Otherwise, I can't vouch for this group. So we've just started to kind of formalize a little bit more, have a very simple website, start to push out some content and insights on LinkedIn. People might see more of that in the weeks to come.
So that's two things that you're doing already. You've got the Ripple Effect Human Network. What else?
The third project is called Big Work. The intent behind that, funnily enough, was a podcast series, but due to time constraints and priorities with myself and my co-founder in that, and she's in San Francisco, so time zones and all the rest of it, we've decided to just create like a mini-series content, so sort of 90 seconds or so. And again, last week we pushed out our first little piece of content from Big Work, and the idea is what is like the human side of work, i.e. the human experience in the workplace, but also the work in the human. So more the psychology and the psychotherapy, the hard work that we all have to do internally as well as in the workplace.
So you've got 3 projects, plus you're doing psychotherapy training. How do you structure your day? What does your routine look like? How do you make sure you fit everything into your day then?
Yeah, I suppose I'm in some ways busier than ever, but I need deadlines. I need lots of things going on in order to get stuff done. I remember my physics teacher, my A-level physics teacher at school once said to us, if you need something done, give it to a busy person. And it so rings true with me and others. So I like to be busy because it means I get more done. I need deadlines. I need sort of limitations. I love things like the Pomodoro technique, where you sit down and you sort of bash out a piece of work within 25 minutes or, you know, your own time frame. So I need deadlines. I love a to-do list. I have to-do lists everywhere. I go to my co-working space every day, which I love. So I think having, that physical routine is so important. I think exercise is super important, if you can, every day. I think good sleep is really important. And keeping up with your social connections, you know, your 3 best friends and those other concentric layers or circles of community you have, which I think is so important. I like the idea of starting small, thinking big. So have a big vision. So I have a big vision for the Ripple Effect, for example, and all my other projects, but really chunk it down because it can feel very overwhelming. So what is the very first step of the very first step?
And are you able to share what that big vision is for the Ripple Effect?
It's still a work in progress a little bit, but I have a sort of B2B vision and a B2C vision. I would love for it to be a mechanism to create social cohesion in companies and within teams whilst learning mental well-being content. And then more on a sort of world social scale, I think I would love to have thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people as part of the Ripple Effect, you know, responding to our content or our, you know, by that point, we'll have an app as opposed to just doing it on WhatsApp. And then having the face-to-face elements in all the major cities in the world. So we already have about 10 or so countries, you know, people from different countries in the Ripple Effect. And the other thing I'm learning is the most vocal people aren't only the ones who get value from a sort of community. The discussion element of the Ripple Effect is optional. And some people don't engage in it. So my assumption was, okay, they probably don't want to opt in for the next one. And I found that they do, actually. And so I think, you know, learning these things, like, and I know that in myself, even just as a bystander within a community or you know, a workspace where you don't actually talk to anyone, but you're just part of something, is hugely valuable. And I keep wanting to go back to my workspace. People keep opting in for the ripple effect.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, which I think was really interesting, was you talked about the shift away from corporate world to running a number of projects and being a busy entrepreneur now, and the difference being that you were sort of holding yourself accountable. You didn't have a manager or a boss that you had to report into. How do you hold yourself accountable? Because I think at uRoutine we talk to lots of people who are really interested in doing lots of things. They want to set up a business, they want to get better at a certain hobby like learning a language, they want to eat more healthily. They say that part of the reason why they don't is they've got no accountability or little accountability. How do you gain accountability as an individual, as an entrepreneur, without a manager, without a boss, and that shift away? How does that work for you?
I think that's so important, and that kind of can sort of make or break, I think, whether you actually get things done or achieve anything. So for me, telling others about it. So Ed, you and I have had some fantastic conversations. You've been an incredible kind of mentor for me, which I'm so grateful for. So telling other people, having that visibility, speaking it out loud, having people on the journey with you. So all of my ripple effect participants, I call them the ripplers, they're on the journey with me now, and they also have expectations from this because I've alluded my dreams about it to them, and they're pushing me along now too. So telling other people, having regular check-ins with people you admire, people who've done similar things, you know, mentors, and having other people exposed to your journey as well, subtly checking up on you. Also seeing how other people have achieved these things. So having that belief in yourself, but seeing how other people have done it also, you know, keeps you going. So I think one of the key things is to keep going. You're going into the unknown, so there's nothing to sort of cling on to apart from your big vision. So I think you just have to keep going.
And what's the most surprising thing that you've found over the last 6 months as you've embarked upon this?
Probably that I love it. I'm loving this phase. It's incredibly creative. I'm learning so much. I can work incredibly quickly, which I couldn't do within a company. It feels risky, but I think you need a level of belief in yourself and your products, and you need that belief from other people, I think. So you do need support from others.
And we talked about risk, or you talked about risk just there a couple of times, and at the beginning you talked about a number of risks you took in the corporate world as well. Do you see yourself as a risk taker in general?
It's a great question. There are different ways to take risks, right? I mean, you can travel, you can go and live in a different country, you can risk your work, you can take different sorts of risks.
It sounds like you've done all of them.
I grew up as a third culture kid, which is this idea of growing up in different countries and having a slightly unanchored upbringing. So my parents moved around the world. So living in a different country doesn't necessarily faze me. And I love it. I love meeting new people. I love being exposed to different cultures. But now I feel like I'm getting that sort of risk and growth from other avenues, so my work. And so actually, I really want to stay put right now. So I think it's a balance. You probably are more likely to take more risks if other parts of your life are less risky, perhaps, unless you're forced to. The sense of risk can feel completely different if it's forced as opposed to a choice.
One of the things that I think a lot of people listening to this and watching this might be thinking is, I'm in a corporate job and I'd love not to be, and I'd love to be setting up my own business or starting my projects. What advice would you give to them based on what you've learned in the last 6 months?
There are a number of sort of variables that influence whether you're going to make that decision or not. I mean, one is obviously financial. Can you afford to not work or bring in some revenue for a few months? Tee up your side hustles whilst you're still in a secure environment, and keep learning. So keep studying on the side, follow your passions, create your side hustles, keep a good network where you are, and still deliver on your day job if you can manage all of that at once.
With a good routine.
Exactly.
And some accountability. There we go. Georgina, finally, for anybody who's interested in what you're developing at the Ripple Effect, the Human Network, Big Work. Where can they go to find out more? How can they get involved? How can they connect?
You can message me directly on LinkedIn or click through from there to the various projects I'm working on.
Georgina, this has been fantastic to hear more about your journey from the corporate world and taking that risk, how that's adapting. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much.